All right, thanks, Guthrie. All right, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for making some time today to connect with us. So as you know, the HECC is in the process of developing its next strategic plan. And to inform that strategic plan, we are conducting focus groups, interviews, and we also have a survey out, which hopefully you've seen. If you haven't, it's open through this week, and we'll make sure to get you the link to participate in that as well. So this focus group today is a public meeting. So we have a group of invited focus group guests, and then we may also have some members of the public join us as attendees just to listen in today, but we'll be inviting participation from the invited focus group attendees. We're going to monitor the chat, and but we will invite folks to chime in verbally, again, from our invited focus group attendees. Yeah, go ahead, Guthrie.
I just wanted to note for folks that in accordance with public meeting law, today's recording will also be posted to our YouTube channel.
Thank you so much for acknowledging that. So what we will do is culminate, bring together all of the input that we gather through the interviews, focus groups, and surveys into a report, a situation assessment report to inform the strategic planning process. We do sometimes use quotes in that report to highlight key themes, but all of the quotes are anonymous and we remove any attributable information. So just invite folks to be candid today, knowing this is also a recorded meeting, but we do really want your candid responses to the degree that you feel comfortable sharing those. And to that end, we have 3 agreements that we ask for folks to commit to in all of our focus groups. And Susan just popped those into the chat. The first one is to step up and step back. We've got a decent sized group here. We want to make sure to hear from everyone. So we encourage you to speak up so that we're able to hear from you. And we also encourage you to be aware of how often you're contributing and to step back and make space for others. In those cases, we do, again, invite you to use the chat if you'd like to chime in that way to make space for others. Allow for different perspectives. So we would expect that in these focus groups. We are not looking to get to consensus or alignment today. So we really invite and expect for folks to have different perspectives in these groups. And we also like to request for you to be bold. We're going to be asking some big, important questions about the future of higher education in Oregon. And so we really want you to think broadly and boldly, and we invite you to bring those big ideas into the conversation today. Can everyone commit to these agreements? And you can just show with a thumbs up or yes in the chat is helpful, just so we know that we're all on the same page. Thanks, everyone. Great. Any questions before we get started? We'll do a quick round of introductions here and then get into our questions. But any questions on process before we get started? All right. So let's do a round of introductions. And Susan, if you wouldn't mind putting those prompts into the chat, and we can start. So I'll just share that I'm Sarah Lechner. I use she, her pronouns. I work with Coraggio Group. We're a strategy, change, and leadership consulting firm, and I lead our community prosperity practice area, which focuses on post-secondary education, workforce development, and economic development in Oregon. And we have been doing work with the HECC for a long time over the years in a number of different ways. So we're excited to be back as a partner leading this strategic planning process. I'll turn it over to Susan.
Thanks, Sarah. Good morning, everyone. Wonderful to be here with you all today. Susan Karaski, consultant with Coraggio Group. I've been with Coraggio Group coming up on 10 years and do a lot of strategic planning, organizational change, large-scale system change. The last couple projects I did where the HECC was involved was with WorkSource Oregon and the continuous improvement Committee for WorkSource Oregon, where we looked at the system and how to improve the system. Thanks, Sarah.
Great, and I'm just gonna, yeah, thanks, Susan. So Rachel, I see that you popped your intro into the chat, so we can do it that way if anyone prefers, but otherwise I'll just go around and call on folks and invite you to unmute and introduce yourself. And Lisa, I will start with you.
Good morning, everyone. Lisa Scari, President of Mount Hood Community.
Oh, Lisa, you suddenly muted again. Strange. Yeah. Looks like you're. Yay, we can hear you.
Good morning, everyone. Lisa Scari, President of Mount Hood Community College. I use she pronouns. Relationship with Mount Hood Community College and the HECC is clearly partner with them and work with them, obviously, funding and advocacy, and supervise. We're different with the community, but under their program.
Thank you, Lisa. And Commissioner Proctor Andrews.
Kai Gala na Luaha Makani, Jen Proctor Andrews, Sinsanu. It's good to see you all. My name's Jen Proctor Andrews. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the vice chair of the Coquille Indian tribe, and I am a freshly minted HECC commissioner. Previously, I worked as our tribe's higher education coordinator, and was put in that seat right when that Oregon Tribal Student Grant was coming out. So I have a lot of experience in tribal concerns around higher education, and I've been a student in Oregon as well. Nice to meet you all.
Great. Thank you. And Dana.
Hi, I'm Dana Richardson, she, hers. I am the executive director for the Oregon Council of Presidents. So the presidents of Oregon's public universities, one of my bosses is on the call. So it's nice to see her and others that I've worked with, and I look forward to the discussion.
Great, thank you. And President Cudd.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ann Cudd, and I'm the president of Portland State University, a role I've only been in for about 8 months, and I've only lived in Oregon for about 8 months. So new and learning a lot about what HECC does, and appreciate your work very much. And so I'm here to help brainstorm. Thanks.
Yeah. And Commissioner Bisco, anything you want to add in your introduction?
Hi, everybody. My name is Rachel Bisco. I am a HECC Oregon State Commissioner. I'm also the Student Leadership Council President at Mid Community College down in Albany. And it's great to be here. I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you. Belle.
Good morning, everyone. Belle Cantor. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the Senior Program Officer for Education at the Oregon Community Foundation. I oversee our proactive education work, early childhood through post-secondary. And our interaction with the HECC has been in a few different ways. One is a partnership with our scholarship program and OSAC that we've had since the mid-'80s. And then we've also worked really closely with the HECC on other policy and advocacy issues, as we often do that work in support of students from low-income families, students from BIPOC communities, and students from under-resourced rural communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Great. And Andrea?
Hi, Andrea Haverkamp, she, her pronouns. I am the political and legislative staff at American Federation of Teachers, Oregon. We are the labor federation that includes the faculty unions and graduate employee unions at OSU, UO, WU, EOU, OIT, PSU, as well as some community colleges and community college classified staff at PCC, LCC. There's a long list, and I also got my doctorate and my master's at Oregon State. So I've also been a student in our university system, and really proud to continue to advocate. Our members interact with the HECC in many, many ways, both in regards to advocacy and just, being everyday employees who are teaching and mentoring our students in the next generation. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Thank you all so much for being here. And it does look like we also have some members of the public who are joining us to listen in today. Thank you for being here. And again, Guthrie will make sure that all members of the public who are joining us also have access to the survey that we have open through this week if you'd like to participate in the process in that way. So just a couple of notes, you all are already doing this, so thank you. Please mute when you're not speaking. It is helpful to use the raise hand function, which you should be able to see up in the top of your toolbar. You can also do that visually, and we'll be paying attention and looking for hands if you'd like to do it that way. We probably won't be able to hear from every person on every question, so do again invite you to use the chat to chime in as you'd like. We have, just to give you a sense, 9 questions that we're hoping to talk through during our time. And Susan will put the first one in the chat, which is kind of starting big picture, thinking at the vision level. From your perspective, what impact should the HECC have on Oregon? When you think about the HECC's work, what is the impact you'd like them to have? Great, and President Cudd.
Sure. So first of all, I think the HECC should be championing a compelling vision for public higher education. I think it's crucial that the HECC helps to increase the completion, quality, and the benefits of higher education for Oregon residents. That it raises the reputation with the public, both in and beyond Oregon, of the state's higher education institutions. And I also think it should help us to increase public and private financial support for Oregon higher education.
Great, thank you so much for getting us going. What would others add? Yeah, Lisa.
I would agree with President Cudd. I would also add being a strategic partner with institutions of higher ed, because we're all in the same ecosystem. So how can we all work together to advance the goals of the state and ultimately best serve all?
Great, thank you, President Skari. Anyone else? Great, yeah, Commissioner Proctor Andrews. Susan, I apologize. I need to step away for just 1 minute. There's someone at my door, so I'm going to do that I need to let in, but I'll be back.
Sure thing. Commissioner Proctor Andrews, please feel free to share.
Thank you. I agree with the 2 comments already made completely, and I feel like we're kind of positioned to do the work also of the recognizing the sovereign nations as a partnership in the way that we relate to those entities as not just clients or what's the word that's often used is stakeholders, but as government entities who can also bring a lot of value, added insight, and partnerships in the form of funding and outside resources that, are related to getting those graduation rates up and the overall way that we, view education in general, and not just higher education. But I think that the higher education institution has a really big effect on how education starts at the earliest ages.
Thank you, Commissioner. Sarah, I see you're back.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Anyone else? And I do see Commissioner Bisco chimed in the chat. Yeah, Andrea.
Hi, thanks. The AFT has really appreciated the HECC's ability to be a leader and coordinator and help manage and direct and provide vision for higher education. And I think that has been reflected in some answers before, and as well as helping to manage, lead, and direct the public ecosystem. And that includes helping ensure all of the fish are swimming in the same direction, and helping make sure that we think about how the public ecosystem is a public good, and advocating for that public good and that public ecosystem of public education. In so many states where public education is under attack or funding is under attack, I think being able to have the HECC as a strong leader in their role and responsibilities on these things is greatly impactful in Oregon.
Great, thank you. I want to make sure that we have enough time for all our questions, so I'm going to move us on to the next one. But again, we can continue to take input in the chat if others have anything else they'd like to add. So our next question is, what do you see as the most significant challenges for higher education in Oregon over the next 3 years? And the 3 years timeframe is because this is a 3-year strategic plan. So what are some of those challenges that you would want to be taken into account in this plan? Dana.
I would say one of the issues that Andrea just flagged that we're all aware of, which is kind of the public discourse around the value of higher education, I think is a significant challenge in the near term, if not the longer term. State funding, state support for higher education. Oregon doesn't really seem to have enough resources to address all the problems that it would like to take on. And oftentimes the higher education budget is used as a place to cut back or present the flexibility needed sometimes to invest in other areas. So I think see that as a challenge. And then for public universities in particular, the college going rate and enrollments are going to be a challenge. I understand colleges are recovering a bit, but we know that there are fewer and fewer high school students who are pursuing post-secondary education in Oregon, and that's going to be a challenge as well.
Great, thank you. Yeah, President Kuhn.
Yeah, I just want to underscore the declining public confidence in higher education that seems to be this narrative that is growing nationally and is really affecting students' decisions to go to college or not to go to college. And that is really tragic. I think we are maybe possibly losing a generation of college-going students. So I had a whole list of challenges, but I want to emphasize that one. And I'll yield my time now.
Thank you. You're welcome to use the chat to add. Yeah, President Skari.
Somewhat related to this, I would also add alignment. I think the more we can get the different groups and not just higher education institutions, but we've got other entities in the state working towards common goals, common visions, we can possibly collect greater momentum and possibly help some of these narratives that are negative and change it. So I would say figuring out how to create that alignment and have people see those things.
Thank you. Belle. Oh, Belle, you're muted.
I hit the mic, but apparently not hard enough. Apologies. I think several of these have already been touched on, but I just wanted to call them out quickly. Affordability, the fact that it's just getting more and more expensive for students to go to college, which is feeding into the enrollment issues and the negative narrative. The declining enrollment, because folks are choosing other options or not seeing this as a possibility. I think a big one is the disjointedness as we look across the educational ecosystem. So that's coming from K-12, that's coming from work, that's coming from community-based organizations into 2-year, 4-year, public, private, but it's several different systems that we're trying to band-aid together, and it should be a single system, or thinking like a single system, or creating real strong links between them. And then the negative narrative that people are talking about, but I think a lot of these other things feed into that.
Great. I see some things coming in via chat as well. Any other challenges that folks would like to name? All right. Let's move forward to our third question, which is, what are the top 3 things that the HECC can do to increase educational attainment for learners in Oregon? Now, you don't have to come out with like 3, but what are the top things? And together, I'm sure that we can come up with those top 3. You're welcome to share 3, but if you only want to share a couple, that's great too. So again, the top things that the HECC can do to increase educational attainment for learners in Oregon. Andrea.
Well, I don't have 3, but I have one that has become one of the AFT's national and the AFT's in the state, developing as kind of a core central tenet of advocacy, which is moving towards fully funded and tuition-free higher education for all who want it. Oregon residents were really inspired by the work that New Mexico has done and that has existed in the past in California and New York, where learners were able to go and attain without lumping all these things in together: the student debt crisis, the basic needs and affordability crisis. First generation students, my parents were ranchers in Kansas, not a college degree in my family tree before, and the ability to make rent and afford college. So that is a very long-term, lofty strategic goal that I know our president and our office are just starting to make calls all around the nation to find levers, pathways, revenue, examples, models, and pie in the sky ideas, but working towards, in the short term, even the Oregon Opportunity Grant and others, increasing that pool and the amount of students who are eligible for it to be able to afford. It just seems like one real key part of educational attainment, on top of culturally expansive, diverse, and like broadening our capacity to meet all the diverse learners of Oregon's wants, needs, and desires, and having them afford it.
Great, thank you so much. And again, I see some things coming in the chat. Yeah, and Commissioner Bisco.
I'm going to try with my sound again. I was told that it was a little echoey from my office, but I agree wholeheartedly with, thank you. I agree wholeheartedly with what Andrea has to say as a active student in a community college, and I will eventually find my way into a university, but the cost of living forces me to take a break from school as a whole. I actually have my associates from LB, which is great, but having to take a break again. I think that when it specifically comes to like scholarships and stuff like that, what I found was I didn't find very many in my area of focus, which was like human development. So like most people think DHS worker, stuff like that. Human development is very, very broad and you can do many things within that space, but finding scholarships to support that was very difficult. Like everybody will focus on like nursing or the trades, which is awesome, but there's this gap of scholarships, which is how people or students specifically can figure out how to further their education and get their needs met, not just for the education themselves. So paying for rent is a difficult one. Like I ended up losing my job because I was a student, couldn't keep up with it, and then I lost my space that I was renting. So it's a very difficult space to be in, and I think that HECC as a whole can kind of navigate bettering that space for students.
Thank you. Thanks for sharing your experience with us. Commissioner Proctor Andrews.
Yeah, I'm going to first agree with Commissioner Bisco and that even managing grants takes a level of financial education that a lot of our students just don't have. And but I want to say something I think is really important is for students to have a coach. And so we have so many students that we want to get into school and we want to keep them there, yet their parents may not even know what they're experiencing, and they don't have time to communicate with them about what it is. And so a coach who they can practice accountability with and meet with, once a week or every 2 weeks, but preferably once a week in the beginning, that said, someone's going to be there saying, did you get that assignment turned in? What are you working on? And, what are your goals and what are you doing to reach those goals? And are we on track? And if we're not, is that okay? And how are we getting back on track or changing the path? I feel like for our transfer students, this needs to be through the community college experience and then into university to help bridge that gap, because we're losing so many people in that, community to university gap. But, for people who want something else, if they're in we call a career and technical education program, we need it there too. A lot of these students don't have resources to figure out how they can work a job and at the same time get their education, even if their tuition is free. But we have so many BIPOC students who have to go to work. That's the #1 reason Indigenous people are dropping out. And so that coaching aspect, I think, is just really huge.
Thank you for adding that. Yeah, Dana.
This is a very kind of technocratic response, but I would say, the HECC has an important accountability role. I think to the extent that we can streamline accountability mechanisms and not layer them upon one another as far as reporting requirements, because every amount of time that somebody's spending time getting information together for a report that's the same as needed for another report is time they could have been spent developing, working with students or supporting people who are working with students. And so it's something that the executive director, I know, is aware of, but just to throw that in the mix.
Great. Thanks for acknowledging that. All right. And again, I think in the interest of time, please do feel free to keep using the chat if you have things you wanted to add on this question that we didn't get to. But we will move to our next question, question 4. What do you see as the Commission's role in promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion? President Kuhn.
Yeah, so I think that this is a really important thing that the HECC can do that needs to be done in Oregon, you know, in this culture, in this national moment where DEI is under attack, and that is can really communicate and champion the values of diversity in terms of its promotion of innovation, in terms of the educational value for all students, in terms of workforce development, talent pipeline development, and in terms also of justice. And then to explain, you know, there's very good research that shows how those values, those benefits of diversity only come about if there's an inclusive climate that is equitable. And so to explain to you know, the public to help with the changing the narrative around DEI. I also think that the HECC should defend race-based equity and inclusion efforts to the fullest extent of the law, so that, you know, Oregon goes as far as we can go.
Thank you. Belle.
I think this is a great opportunity. I agree with everything that President Kuhn just said, and really leaning into that and leaning strong into it. And I think that this is an area where the HECC can really adopt sort of a targeted universalism approach, where we're looking at efforts for all students to be more successful in higher ed, around affordability, around creating inclusive institutions that promote sense of belonging, and then really looking at particular populations that are most struggling to be successful, attend and be successful in post-secondary. And then find real targeted ways to address that, and being really strong in that language and in those actions. And we have had some examples of that with the tribal grant, with the foster student waiver, with the ability for students who are undocumented to be able to receive state aid. There's a number of examples. And so looking for more opportunities like that, where they can lean into real specific populations and have real targeted supports across the institutions. We have a number of institutions that are either new or emerging HSIs, Hispanic serving institutions. And that's a place that we can really make sure that we're not just designating or that those institutions aren't just getting designated as HSIs, but they're actually supported to transform the way that they work and support Latinx students, and being incredibly purposeful about that. And that's something that can happen across institutions. And so it's a great role for the HECC. And then looking for other opportunities to do that, to support particular populations.
Thank you. President Scari.
I would just add, related to the external part, I think also for the commission, it's also how are they organizing and serving as like role models of what they want to see, and how are they setting the example of what doing the DEI work looks like in our state and in our higher ed institutions. So it's a little different twist, but I think that role model piece also can be very powerful.
Thank you. Anything that others would like to add on this question?
I have my hand up. Sorry, I'm not sure.
Oh,
Oh, sorry, Jen.
Jen.
Did I? Didn't mean to
Go
jump in,
ahead,
but
Dana. And
Yeah,
then, yeah, go ahead.
I was just thinking that this is a topic that, you know, there's kind of overlapping spheres amongst people in higher education. The HECC's got, you know, part of it. But so I think to the extent that we're aware of public universities and presumably other institutions are aware of HECC activities, and then vice versa. How are we talking and thinking about DEI on campuses? I think there's benefit to kind of having understanding about how the spheres of influence are overlapping.
Thank you. Yeah, Commissioner Proctor Andrews.
Yeah, I think that's really important to understand how everything overlaps and how the different programs engage people. I feel like the HECC can take a really big leadership role by really being in the community and engaging with different BIPOC community leaders and in other events, and just talking to people. Like, what are your needs and what have you thought of? Like, really, one of the most impactful things for me was meeting with Osvaldo a couple of years ago and having one of the HECC representatives come to us into our community and say, what are your wildest dreams, around students? And we spend, like, hopefully so much of our young lives in school and learning that it should be not just studying the books and taking the tests, but holistic engagement in culture. And we won't know about that unless we're engaging with communities. So including culture, including ways where students can see each other and see people who look like them doing what they never thought they could do. This is one of the really important things. And I know a lot of BIPOC communities and our minority communities are just really working hard on this. And there's a lot of energy that goes into it, but creating these mentorship programs, if we have a coaching program that includes, people from their community, then I think it's going to really go a long way. And also, to that comment about exercising, the full extent of the law, and I feel like that can be embodied in policy in a really impactful way. Those are the things that I see that I know as a tribal member and as a tribal leader. When we have that engagement in a way that works for us, it's highly valuable.
Thank you. I'm going to go to our fifth question. It's a little bit longer. I'm going to read it, but Susan will also get it into the chat when she has a chance. So the recent Oregon Values and Beliefs Survey indicated that 72% of Oregonians lean towards a feeling that a technical trade education is often a better pathway to success than a university education, while 28% feel that a university education is the best pathway to success. We wanted to kind of explore this a bit and are curious, in your view, what do you think is the reason behind this difference in opinion? And we will start with you, Commissioner Biscoe.
Thank you. I found this question very intriguing and kind of personal. So as I was mentioning, I have an associates in human development, which when I started, I thought it would be great. And then like having that degree, I'm like trying to go into the workforce because I have like, I don't know, like a term left here. And I found it really, really difficult because my degree, even though that everybody tells you get a college degree, everything will be great, you'll have a great job, it doesn't match up to what the workforce is looking for. And as a student who's put like a lot of time and a lot of effort and money into something that I thought would make my life better, it actually hasn't made it as great as I thought it would be. And I have noticed a couple of my friends have like the trade education and they can go immediately into the workforce because it's that kind of area where there's a high need for that position or that workforce type development. And I think that it is the reason there's a 70 to 28% is for that reason. Students are getting discouraged when they get like an associate's and they think they're going to go on to university, and then it just seems like a waste of time and money after working really hard for something just to not have a good outcome.
Hi, this is Miriam.
Thanks, Commissioner Visco.
Great. Yeah, Andrea.
Yeah, there's I think three dynamics that I think are come to mind. One is what was just said, is that for a lot of people, when they see that in the Portland metro area, TriMet is hiring entry-level diesel mechanics at $42 an hour full time with a $5,000 hiring bonus and benefits, and then they think about taking the reality of becoming an academic professor is that you make $25,000 or less for 5, 7, 8 years of your life through your master's and your PhD on average. And then you might take an adjunct job and make not a whole lot of money. And very few full-time jobs exist in the academy these days. And there's a lot of poverty for faculty. Research positions are becoming more slim, and this dynamic is real, it's researched, and there's that hard fact. And then there's also the social stratification. It's well researched. I'm going to drop some citations if anyone's interested. But research from as far back as 1977 up to currently shows that higher education can function as a form of social stratification. I noticed myself that my language, the way I talk after getting a PhD and being in higher education for so long, is leagues different than my family back in Kansas with goats and Angus cattle and my uncle who does soybeans. Like, it's a different language. And I think that then connects to the cultural sort of moment where higher education is under attack as woke college professors and, teaching these obscure things that don't actually matter, because what you need is diesel mechanics. You don't need women, gender, sexuality studies. I did so much work in women, gender, sexuality studies, and it was transformative. And it's one of the most cherished departments that I ever had the privilege of being involved with. But I think when you have real economic divide, real inability of people who are first gen to actually land engineering jobs, for example, as a former engineer, because they don't have family connections or internship connections. And then the cultural moment where I think people are hearing on the news and by podcasters and TikTokers that higher education is bad and, you should go just do this other work, technical and trade work. Those three factors, I think, have a confluence, and I think that we're seeing the result of some of those confluences. And there's probably many more factors at play, but those are just three that came to mind when I read this question.
Thank you so much. Yeah, President Skari, did you want to chime in? Good. Okay.
I'm just gonna agree with her and say I think this is, part of the narrative going on right now of the devaluing of higher education. And we're in a soundbite society, and so people pick up on things, and somehow 4 years are bad, and community colleges sometimes get caught up that somehow technical education is seen as different. And I think there's it's something we're going to need to overcome, that all education has value, and there are outcomes, but we need people to spend some time and see what the data is and be patient for those outcomes.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll take one more comment from President Kuhn.
Yeah, just quickly, I think that the question really is for us as higher education professionals and for the HECC, is there truth to this or is it a false narrative, right? And I think there's some of each. There's a lot of, divisiveness, political divisiveness that's, pitting right against left and, higher education, folks with college educations against those who don't. That's one thing. But I do think also that we have to look at affordability, we have to look at completion rates, and pathways into great careers. So there's a little truth, but there's also misperception.
Thank you. So we'll move to our next question. You all started to touch on this a bit earlier, but want to see what you would add. What policy or advocacy issues do you think the HECC should prioritize? Dana.
I would say affordability, whether or not that's administering the Oregon Opportunity Grant or other funding scholarships that they support, and helping unpack, particularly for legislators, cost drivers, so many of which aren't even within the control of institutions. We've talked about, hunger, housing. So helping let policymakers understand the full scope of the affordability challenge, I think, is a big priority.
Thank you. President Khan.
Yeah, so I think a lot of things have already been discussed and that I would also agree with, but I don't want to miss the opportunity to put in a plug for research institutions and the importance of having the opportunities for our citizens to attain higher levels of education, because I think that's critical for the economic development of our state, both the research and the higher levels of educational attainment.
Thank you. President Scari.
I would add, I think it was 2 years ago now, the Colleges and Universities commissioned a study on higher education in Oregon. And one of the recommendations came out around an economic development plan, kind of a statewide plan. And so I think they should prioritize some efforts around helping us move us closer to some sort of state plan.
Thank you. Any other advocacy or policy focus areas? Andrea?
This is something I've heard around our membership and our leaders, is that similar to what was mentioned before, I believe Dana mentioned, or maybe it was Anne, reducing and collapsing and streamlining reporting and other standards. Related to some of that streamlining, the Oregon Promise and Oregon Opportunity Grant, there's a lot of different grant programs. If these could be streamlined and consolidated, although with their different aims, there might be something there to then get at the affordability thing. So if there's any policy or advocacy that could help streamline some of those things. And then I think another thing that the AFT has been hoping for is more funding, one, for the HECC and for our institutions, but also some more direction and oversight in empowering the HECC to help lead, because that is an important mission and I think an important role that the coordinating commission can have, is helping be that leader and direct and manage capacity enrollment programs, and making sure everything is moving in that sort of same goal direction as a public ecosystem.
Thank you. Yeah, Belle, I saw your hand earlier. Did you want to chime in?
I think most of my points have just been made around affordability, around streamlining all of the different aid and all of the different funding and all of those. And then also thinking about the whole ecosystem and how we can use policy and advocacy to really link the whole system.
Great. We'll take one more comment on this one. Commissioner Proctor Andrews.
Thank you. I realize I'm talking a lot, but I really want to also agree on that streamlining the funding and like down to the student level so many students are confused about how their grants work, and honestly, so many colleges are confused about how the grants work. And the people who are in charge of disbursement and administering these grants are causing students to not go to school. Like literally they go to school and the teachers are like, you shouldn't be here, and there's confusion and they can't get their books. And it feels like a mess. And then I'm just say culture again. I feel like we can all say like, hey, we have a longhouse here, or we have all these different clubs, but until it's ingrained in the system, it's not acting how it should be. And so just recognizing and engaging with those communities, or going back and looking at what you've learned from previous engagement, but also funding that engagement. So every time you're making that contact with the community, you're asking them to do more work and to make sure they're supported in educating us on what they need, because that's our responsibility too. And then the culture language programs. I have paid the University of Oregon before for the pleasure of learning my own native language and getting credit for it. And it was difficult. It was difficult to do that, and I don't ever want a student to be doing that again. We can be doing there's just so much to do in this area. Just because it shouldn't cost me $1,000 to learn my own native language and be recognized for that. I just see some confused faces. So there's a lot of work to do in the cultural area, and if students can feel at home at school, they're going to keep going.
Thank you. So we'll move to question 7. So as you can imagine, there will need to be some trade-offs considered as the HECC thinks about where to focus their energies and efforts within this next strategic plan. So when you think about where the HECC should be focused, what are some trade-offs that you can imagine they will need to consider? Dana.
I don't think this really answers the question, but part of it I think does. And I just wanted to get it in the mix. In my experience, the commission spends time on a relatively narrow set of issues. You do get, I think, flavors of some of the additional work that staff does, but in general, there's kind of a mismatch between where the commission spends their time and where the staff spend their time. And I think it's interesting. I just want to kind of have you be aware of that. I don't know if it's really a trade-off, but I do think it's something to think about for the commission, that if you start to better see the staff activities, right, will that take away maybe from where you otherwise spend your time in your commission meetings and the topics that you focus on? So that's kind of what brought it to my mind. I don't know if that's helpful, but it's in the mix.
Thank you. Any other trade-offs? And another way to think about this is, in order for the HECC to focus on the areas that you have been emphasizing, is there any place that they could do less? This is always a tricky one. And important. So we in all of our organizations. So do invite you to continue to consider that, and feel free to follow up if you have thoughts. Thank you, President Cudd, and we are getting to the end of our time. And so I'm actually going to have Susan, if you wouldn't mind putting both of the last two questions in the chat, and we can open them both up and just see if folks have interest or energy in either of these questions. So number 8, one of the HEC's strategic focus areas is to streamline learner pathways. What are your thoughts on ways the HEC can impact this? So that's open, or the last one is also open. Another area of focus is expanding opportunity through outreach. Where do you think HEC should focus its efforts here? So invite responses on either. Just let us know which one you're responding to. President Skari.
This is actually a question on outreach that could have a different answer. But when I think about that, I think that outreaching, marketing, right, doing that engagement. And my comment would be, I think that best lands with colleges, right, in connecting with students. And my fear would be, if we have both doing it, are we going to potentially further confuse students? And so I've misunderstood the outreach wrong. My apologies.
Great, thanks for raising that concern. Yeah, Belle.
All right, I forgot to raise my virtual hand. Related to the outreach as well, to build on that a bit, I wonder if we've talked a little bit about changing the narrative and addressing the narrative and perception out there. And if HEC's role around outreach is really about that general narrative around going to post-secondary and what that means for students and what that means for families. And then the colleges, the institutions' role around outreach is that student-focused that Dr. Skari was talking about.
Thank you so much. Dana.
I appreciate the comments that Belle and Lisa made. It helps me understand it a little bit. I think I kind of have a similar question with this streamline learner pathways. I don't always understand what that means for the commission, right? Like, I understand what it means for an institution, but right, I can't quite understand how they would do that. So maybe it's just better understanding the question.
Okay, thank you for acknowledging that. Any other thoughts? And again, feel free to use the chat on either of these questions before we close. Yeah. Commissioner Proctor Andrews.
Yeah, just quickly, I feel like one of the ways that we can affect learner pathways again is by having the coaches available. And I know there's been a lot of work done on lining up the classes and the credits and how they transfer. But again, we are losing a lot of students falling through that gap. And if we want to keep them in Oregon, it really behooves us to make that transfer as easy as possible. And I know that there's been a lot of work done on that lineup, but really having a person that can guide a student through that transfer of funding, the transfer of living situation, all of those things to consider, where you're going to do your laundry, are impactful.
Thank you. So we are at time, and we welcome any additional thoughts folks might want to add into the chat before we close out. A reminder, if you have not completed our survey, it's open through the rest of this week. And so we do encourage you to do both. Even though you attended the focus group, it's helpful for us to have your participation in both to get some of that more quantitative input. But thank you all so much for your time, your insights. We really appreciate it, and look forward to sharing where this all goes with you further down the line. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Well,